I don't really remember the day I fondled my piano teacher's sister's chihuahua. It might have been her cousin's chihuahua. We'll get back to that. Just get them out of the way. Here are some one-word descriptions of other quote-unquote sexual firsts. Mostly to the bad to mixed bag ones, because you can't make humor out of happiness, to quote the great sage Charles Schulz. First crush, premature. First kiss, drunk, alternately late, alternately nice, alternately toothy. First quarrel, toothy. First hookup, awkward, fumbly, brief. First marriage, mistake, wrong. First divorce, necessary, correct, right. First one-night stand, bad. First one-night stand that I blogged about while pretending to file patents for a Boston-based boutique IP law firm, which blog was subsequently perused by the other participant in the one-night stand, and it hurt their feelings, and was also subsequently perused by my employers, possibly to probably contributing to my getting fired a few months later. I fucked up, I was a dick, sorry for being a dick, I had no right to do that. Hyphenated. I have had regrets. I have been a regret. The past perfect is the past that we possess, we have had. As if the doneness of it makes it thing, as if the thingness of it has made it perfect. Sometimes the thingness of the past perfect comes back when you're in the shower, or when you're walking along on a crowded street, or when you're at the grocery store picking out, say, Swiss chard. Sometimes you see it stuck on the drain like hair. Sometimes it looks back at you with wide, innocent eyes saying, "Hey, remember me?" Rolls over on its back, legs curled up and tail pointing up. I'm still here. But what about the things we can't quite remember, that we don't have, that shifting dreamlike feeling? That makes me think of home. That day there was a haze, I think I remember that. Everything might have been melting. The apartments wavered and swayed. I could feel the stainless steel of my watch band staining, something like an acid eating at my wrist. So summer, maybe. Summer in Seoul. I remember feeling mute and expectant. I was growing again into a quiet. Something grew. When I moved back to Korea, I was 7.5. I got on the plane late at night on the 24th of January, 1986. I got off the plane and discovered it was early in the morning on January 26th. I've traveled into the future, I thought, as I hugged my mother, who I didn't remember living with before. I'd read The Time Machine a couple of times. I knew what to expect from the future. The future was fucked up. I had to go back to 2nd grade after being in 3rd grade in Wisconsin. Of course, I was a year ahead in Wisconsin, so it bounced out. The future was overpopulated. There had been 18 kids in my class at Sherwood Elementary School. There were 56 kids in my class in the future. The future was Victorian. Instead of central heating, there was a wood-burning stove in the middle of the classroom. The future was a place where I could more or less understand what everyone said, but wasn't fluent enough in Korean to say anything back. The future was a place where 56 kids gathered around my desk after each class period and gawked and laughed. The future was grim, dark, grimy, violent. 3rd graders swore a lot more in the future, especially when they didn't think you could understand them. "Hey you, speak English," they'd say. "Speak some English, fucker." I understood, "새끼야." It was what Dad called me when he got mad. In the future, I got tired of being sworn at and not being able to talk in words, and instead started talking with my fists. And I punched them in the stomach or the face or the balls, whichever was closest. It was easy. I was bigger than them. In the future, I was a giant. Finally, I could speak again. They understood what I understood. Folded up, walked off, curled up around the memory of knucklebone words. Anyway, it seemed like the thing to do, you know? Because in the future, the teachers carried around things they used to hit you. The men carried broom handles and sawed-off pool cues and duct-taped lengths of hockey sticks with "Love hurts," and "This rod spares no child," written in large, friendly letters. The woman carried rulers or thin little lacquered bamboo switches because the future was an intensely hierarchical patriarchy. Victorian. When you get hit in the palms with love hurts, you hear the sound first. Then you hear the outline of love hurts in white across your palms where the blood fled from. Love hurts, and where the whiteness is numb. But you can't bend your head to look because otherwise love hurts will clip the tip of your nose as it moves back up. Then the blood rushes back, all pink and blue and red, and the outline of love hurts sings inside you a sharp and buzzing song as if your hand was filled with tiny bouncing balls, each every hot and hornet humming. And again, love hurts comes down again, crack, clap, rush, flush, and hum. Love hurts and keeps on going, spares no child. The bamboo switches were worse, though, when used with conviction, just FYI. I grew to like the future in a weird way. Does that make sense? Being hit by a teacher meant they cared. I was grateful. It was what I deserved. It made me feel safe. Being hit by my parents meant they cared. They didn't hit me much. On Teacher's Day, which was a holiday in the future, we all stood at our desks and sang the Teacher's Day song. The teachers, minds, mother, father, we thank teachers' love, we will repay. I meant every word. You have taught me your language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse is probably the fourth or fifth best known snippet from The Tempest, right behind I'll drown my book, full fathom 5, oh brave new world. The speaker is Caliban, odd fish, neither human nor animal, the mezzanine of the human's mezzanine between the animal and the angelic. I was Caliban for years. No matter how good I got at school at taking tests, and I got very, very good very, very fast, I was never fully human there. I was most fluent with curses, with hitting and being hit, with love hurts. You know what happens when you get punched in the teeth while you're wearing braces? I remember a moment from 5th grade summer, bending over a sink at camp, spitting out odd little liver-colored clapper gobbets, my lips ragged and tattered, loops of them hooking onto my braces and stuck between my lower incisors. That odd calm that comes over you after you've just gotten your ass handed to you. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It's full of visions. There was a golden haze around me. It was love. I could see for miles. The storm cloud dark over the mountains, the roads covered with dead fire-bellied toads, the pitiless cities. I understood Macbeth. I knew life and death. I looked at the blood, how it struggled against the current, and saw that it was my semblance. I was thinking to myself in English, oh, so that's what it means. That's what it means. Gouts of blood. I don't necessarily mean to give the impression that I was abused by my teachers or my parents. If I was abused by the culture. And culture is a function of history. History abuses all of us, chihuahuas and kids and nations. And actually, it wasn't that I didn't belong, it was that I belonged completely. I mean, the Korea where I grew up, it may be different now, I have no idea, was all about violence. Think about it. I mean, here's a country that for about 80 years just could not catch a fucking break. First, it's the Japanese coming in and using the entire country as a combination factory, brothel, coal mine, staging ground for invasion. That's 36 years of the Japanese doing cute little things like outlawing the speaking of Korean and press-ganging young men for cannon fodder and young women for military fuck parlors. Comfort woman. Ever hear about that? Anyway, so you Americans nuked the shit out of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, fucking glassed the place, and everybody in Korea, it sounds horrible, but horror begets horror, they're honestly psyched. There's a collective woot emanating from the Korean peninsula, the likes of which was never heard again until Kim Il-sung shit his pants and dropped dead 50 years later. But then the Russians come in, start setting shit up in the north, and the Americans come in, start setting shit up in the south, and before you know it, it's all a fucking civil war. Except really it's the USSR and the USA getting down to it, going 12 rounds at the ring using the two Koreas as fucking boxing gloves. And there's whole cities in the north just emptying out. All of the people heading south to get out of the line of fire, my father's family among them. Look, this place, America, You haven't had a war here on this soil since 1865. I mean, maybe that's why this country is okay with starting wars all over all the time. Maybe it's because you just don't remember. You don't have anybody who fucking remembers what it's like to be invaded and bombed for your entire country to get fucked in the ass. I speak as one who loves it here. Love hurts. Do you remember that it's possible to actually lose a kid in a war? I'm not talking kids getting shot or blown up or even kidnapped, because at least you know what happened and who to blame. I'm talking straight up misplacing them, like leaving your car keys somewhere. I'm talking you and your family are marching through the hills in winter and gotta purchase your slippers, and there's Chinese bombs falling to the north and American machine gun nests to the south, and you have a baby in your arms and a 4-year-old girl hanging onto your skirt, and you're trying to get to safety, but there's no safety, and all of a sudden you don't know where your daughter is. She's just gone, vanished, no trace, not a bloodstain, not a fucking photograph, and you can't go back and look for her. That's how my dad lost his sister. So finally there's a ceasefire, not a peace, not an end, but a pause. There's rebuilding, and there's a military dictatorship, and there are protests against the military dictatorship, which go about as well as protests against brutal dictatorships typically go, which is to say not at all, and always, always, the entire northern half of the peninsula aimed at your head like a loaded gun. And because the North is a loaded gun, you load yours. It should be Korean standoff, not Mexican. You realize that? And every boy goes to the army and spends 3 years getting the shit kicked out of them, all the while knowing that there are a million rifles on the other side pointed south, and then they get out, and some of them become teachers, and most of them become dads, and all of them know how to fuck you up. All of them speak fluent, punch, curse, spit in your face, and pass it on to their children. Every swinging dick ready to shoot. Wonder ye then at the anger issues. Wonder ye then at love hurts. Love hurts here too. I'd hit that, people say. I'd hit it up. Are you hitting at me? Smack My Bitch Up was a hit song by Prodigy in the 90s. Hit Me Baby One More Time was a hit song in the 90s. Give me a hit of that. How many hits did you get yesterday? I was walking along and all of a sudden it just hits me, you know? We all live in the future. Sometimes I think it's time to strike my flag, hit the road, strike out for the territories, punch out, hit on a solution, go strike up an acquaintance with a different fucking idiom or tense. But back to the future in Korea, and back eventually to the Chihuahua, because we haven't forgotten about that. Later on, there were boys in middle school who used to jerk off in class, sitting at the back of the room with the textbook propped up, and behind the textbook, a Xerox of a copy of a badly translated hentai. They bragged about it. In Korean slang, it's dartdari, which is onanismatapuya for the sound of tiny metal bells. Imagine growing up there. And when you whack it, you tinkle. The more formal term for masturbation in Korean, one that applies to Jack and Jill alike, phonetically is chawi. Phonetically, it's kind of like you're saying yes in two European languages. Another yes is the Ouija, which is how you listen to the dead, your hands on a planchette or a little plank that moves seemingly of its own volition. Chawi reverses Ouija. I don't know whether that makes a difference. Is it how we talk to the dead? How we listen to what's about to be alive? No matter. The word's from Chinese. In Chinese, it means to comfort yourself. Autoconsolation. Again, the young woman taken by the Japanese word comfort woman. The winter after 6th grade was when I started to comfort myself. My mom was in the US with a research fellowship at the Folger Shakespeare Library. I was at home in Korea with my dad. The Gulf War was on, the first one, I mean. It was exciting to watch war on TV. Sometimes we'd watch boxing, and sometimes we'd watch war. We'd sit around in our underwear and eat whole bags of clementines and fart and watch Patriot missiles arc high into the sky, curve of Patriot intersecting with curve of Scud and cheer. Never closer the whole rest of our lives, to quote Seamus. Evenings, we'd do math. I didn't want to do math. My dad wanted me to go through all of middle school math in a month. My dad won. There was a lot of him saying, "Sekya." There was a lot of him holding himself back from hitting me and hitting the table instead. I'd cry at night. It was a lot of feeling angry at my dad and then feeling guilty about feeling angry at my dad. The closest my dad ever came to punching me was 2 years ago, so, that's okay. Love hurts. At night, crying, I'd cut myself for comfort. I think every boy sleeps with a hand on his balls. I mean, why wouldn't you if you had the balls for it? I tried to remind myself my father was a loving father, that harsh was from love. When you start, you're not really feeling sexual per se because you don't know what sex is, aside from reading the Encyclopedia Britannica 1987 edition. You might be picturing a kiss from the movies, maybe. Or you might be holding yourself, crying, and saying to yourself, "But he loves me so much," is why. Well, we don't have to get into mechanics or anything, but you know that feeling, maybe. That slow, prickly heat that starts in your feet, like being scrubbed clean and raw from the inside with a sable hair brush. At some point, I'd figured out that was a thing, that I liked it. Like hot soda water around your ankles and in between your toes. Like somebody humming a sharp and buzzing song in your skin. Love hurts. Comforts hurt with hurt. Of course, I hadn't gone through puberty yet, so I could never finish. The Chihuahua never finished either. I loved my piano teacher because I could talk to her, really talk to her, because she'd gone to conservatory in the US and spoke fluent English. When I think about her now, I can't quite picture her. I've misplaced her face. I can't really place the summer we were walking through either. It could have been any time between 5th and 7th grade. I tried looking for the apartment we walked to on Google Street View. I found the building where I grew up, the bookstore where a couple of years later I stood in a corner trying to hide an erection, reading a bilingual, abridged and censored edition of Lady Chatterley's Lover, the middle school where boys tinkled in class, the elementary school where love hurts, the staircase where I jumped and cracked my shin and didn't tell my parents because hiding pain was also love. So many of the places of that long ago future where I fought my little wars, where I walked and felt like I couldn't speak, and so I began to write. But I couldn't see the way we walked. At the piano teacher's sister or cousin's apartment, I played with her son. We lounged and ate ice cream and watched The Killer on VHS. The Chihuahua came and watched us. On the TV, Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee pointed their guns at each other's heads, which is how you say "I love you" in John Woo. We took turns petting the Chihuahua as we watched Chow Yun-fat propel himself down a staircase with a Remington pump-action 12-gauge, bumping down and shooting the whole way. The Chihuahua rolled over, and I started rubbing its belly. Excuse me? In my memory, I'm rubbing the Chihuahua's belly. I'm rubbing it up, down, and then the little tendon moving in and out of its sheath like a dark red lipstick. I touched the sheath because I didn't think it was what it was. On screen, Chow Yun-fat kills an old friend and sobs, stands up, grips his gun, and What is that? I'm thinking. Is that really what I think it is? How different from mine. No balls. Does it want to be petted there? How strange. Little stretchy fur covered skin to keep it from hurt. And how strange to come out where it is safe and kept from hurt. I am not thinking about my piano teacher, how her hand felt on my hand, dry, warm fingers on the place on my wrist closest to blood. Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee bleed, shoot, toss each other clips, tourniquets, stand back to back, pointing guns at the world. But for once, I am not thinking about love hurts. Puzzled, I am thinking about the Chihuahua, what and why it likes, how it is not afraid of hurt. The rest of my life followed.